Thank you, Samuel. Thank you, Samuel. I'm going to go to the man who sits on the money. Patrick over there. Surely with all that money, he would have created at least 1 million jobs. He hasn't. Could it be that industrialization is no longer going to create for us jobs? Even as we discuss now, yesterday it became clear that GM, General Motors in the US, was going to lay off 25,000 employees because technology is eating up the job space. The company is growing, but the jobs are being shared off. Is industrialization still going to give us the jobs we need? I know you are doing a lot of IT in your space. You have the best ITs in this town. Can you speak to that theme of the budget, industrialization for job creation and shared prosperity, plus any other thing you want to add that is in that dimension of growth of jobs?
Thank you, Mr. Mhumuza. I'm going to make a couple comments. Sometimes when said long enough, people believe it. You've heard the word, you're sitting on a pile of cash. Let me just assure you, we don't have cash as
very
NSSF. I said that sometimes, and I was the CFO. If all the employees of NSSF connived to steal the cash available on the branches, the most they could steal at any one go was about 70 million shillings. That's the day we kind of replenished all our paid cash in our branches. Because we collect the money, say at 11 a.m., by 12 it is reinvested. We don't, so we are not sitting on cash. Secondly, the thing I wanted to kind of reassure about, and it means that as we're now investing and we're looking at some of the cost of capital as hindrances, there are certain things we can do. For example, the withholding tax on interest income in Uganda is 20%. The withholding tax in our neighboring country, Kenya, is 10%, Tanzania is 10%. Now from a risk profile, there's not too much difference in the risk profile between Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. So an investor coming and is making a decision to invest or buy bonds, and especially because in Uganda we're an import economy, so the exchange rate is very critical, and that's low supply and demand. We need more dollars to stabilize our shilling. To attract that investor, as a country, we have to pay a premium in the rates we offer. And that 10% basis point, which is different in that, causes the cost of capital in Uganda to be higher than the cost of capital in Kenya or Tanzania. If we just harmonized it, and it was amazing that when we increased it to 10, because it used to be 15% across, we increased ours to 20, Kenya reduced theirs to 10. Now, is there a correlation between that and development? We can see what has happened in those areas, and that's something we can do very easily. The second one I think we ought to do, if you look at Bank of Uganda as it was for the last 30 years, for the last 20 years, their mandate of microeconomic stability, which is price stability, they've actually done a wonderful job. The last 20 years, the only time there was a spike in inflation rates in this country was 2008, 2009. Our inflation rate went up to 14% because the global crisis was going on. Then 2011, 2012, because there was a global recession in place, it went up to 18% in 2011. The rest of the years, Bank of Uganda has done an amazing job in keeping inflation in single digits, which is great. However, should that be the only mandate of Bank of Uganda? In 1977, the U.S. Federal Reserve was then given a dual mandate, not just price stability, but also maximum employment. And they have that dual mandate because where Bank of Uganda sits, they look at the flow, they look at the inflation, they look at money. They can decide through monetary policy how to increase, expand the economy. So they should also be able to look at the jobs and the impact on the jobs. Last year in 2016, there was a big debate in the US as to whether countries with central banks with the single mandates, price stability, have done better in inflation management than countries with dual mandates, inflation rates and full employment. And this was the result. The countries that actually have the dual mandates have done better in managing inflation than countries with single inflation, which was really incredible. It was like an eye-opener. So I think if we could really unshackle Bank of Uganda and increase their mandate, not just to look at inflation, But now look at maximum employment. Then the very thing that you came up with here and said that, you know what, the first thing I ask an investor is not how much revenue am I going to get, but how many jobs are you going to create? Now it becomes a government policy right from every institution in the government, that every institution is looking at jobs, 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 jobs. And that would do an amazing thing in this country. Finally, I think in your speech you raised an aspect of a number, and I think it was also mentioned before. 69%, according to this, of our people are subsistence farmers, which means only about 31% of Ugandans are actually in the non-subsistence form of the economy. And those are the ones we tax, if they pay tax at all. Not all of them pay, but that's what we're all looking at. It appears that if we need to increase our tax base, we need to be looking at the 69% in the subsistence economy. Now, how do we increase the aggregate demand of the 69%? And I use a simple example. If you look at Uganda today, farmers plant maize. The time they plant the maize, the price of maize is 700, 800 shillings a kilo. Nuts goes there, gives them seeds, they plant the little nuts, and all the farmers plant. 4 months later, all the farmers harvest. The price of maize is 200. Now, interestingly enough, they leave it raw. They say 40% of the harvest is rotting. 3 months later, the price of maize has gone back to 300, which would tell you that our problem is not farmers not growing. It's not a supply side issue. It's a demand problem. Can we have an intervention deliberate by government? And I'll give you an example. NADS budget is over 200 billion shillings today. Why not get NADS, split it through NADS? NAD 1, NAD 2, NAD 3. NAD 1, do the traditional thing NADS does, 80 billion shillings. Go there, tell the farmers, advise them, do whatever you need. NADS 2, another 80 billion shillings. Grow or plant or build silos, cleaning machines, systems, and logistics. NAD 3, give farmers forward contracts. It's the harvest season, price of maize is 200 shillings. Guess what? Next season, we'll pay you 500 shillings. NADS, same money. Now, suddenly, NADS is able to give the farmers a market. They buy the seeds, store it in silos. Now, suddenly, we've got 10 million kilograms of maize in one place. Now, NADS can go to Malawi, can go to Tanzania, and say, state to state, we've got 10 million kilograms of maize, we'll sell it to you at $1 per kilo. And we do that, and we can make NADS self-sustaining within 3 months. The example I'm using is the 69%, what they're looking for is that market, that demand that is predictable for their market. And as a government, we need to intervene there. The private sector is too selfish to intervene. They won't build the infrastructure. They won't build the things that need to go. The government steps in, and then we build the capacity and the aggregate demand of our 69%. Thank you.
Interesting discussion. I'm glad I've tickled that out of you, because I've heard many people say, why don't we use NSSF money to invest? It's already invested.
Thank you.
It's not there. Mm-hmm. So don't bring your standard gauge, I don't know, cattle business, I don't know what, and say, we have 10 trillion in NSSF. Mm-hmm. That man doesn't just sit on man and watch it. Mm-hmm. He has already deployed all of it. So we need to find new money that can do for us new things. How do we trigger those new sources? Honorable Minister, last time we discussed about how do we capitalize UDB. Professor Sejake has said you and him spent 5 years looking for the money, we haven't found it. And we said maybe let's open up a discussion on how do we sell shares. Let's pick the model of Africa Development Bank. It's an Africa Development Bank, but so many other people have put in money by way of shares. And it is helping us to do so many things as a continent. So similarly, if we take the same route, we can find people to buy shares into Uganda Development Bank, and it will develop Uganda, not the guys who bring in the money. We need some new money. NSSF's money is already deployed, and the return on investment is actually challenging him. But he has also modified our theme. Industrialization for jobs. I think we also need to look at monetary policy for jobs. I think the discussion is bringing on the table. It looks like the scope we have given to the central bank is so narrow, price stability. Other people have also looked at monetary policy with a view of growing the economy and generating jobs. And this is in the US, this is in the UK. I remember one time the governor for the UK said, I was looking for inflation. Now when inflation began to come in, I could not still raise my rates because I hadn't received enough jobs. We have been seeing that discussion in the US, quantitative easing, putting money into the economy to stimulate aggregate demand, to create jobs. Now that the jobs are beginning to come up, they were still reluctant to increase their interest rates that much, but they are beginning to raise them because of Trump's economics and wars with China, which are beginning to push up inflation. But that increase in interest rates in the US might affect us. The Europeans are still not changing anything. So it looks like there is more to interest rates that can speak to jobs and growth. And that's a discussion we want to continue with within this meeting, but also hereafter. I want to get back to Hadija to speak to the space of the tax base. We have already said, can taxation also play a role in growth? Remember, this discussion is about how do we trigger growth. And we're trying to look at what are the other policies that may speak to growth, but we haven't used them with that dimension. We possibly have been using them with other dimensions, and in the process, we might have negated some growth. Hadija, what are you seeing in your space on the tax issues?
What I must acknowledge, first of all, is that of course, we want to become self-reliant using taxes. But where we are growing short, every year we are trying to improve, and we are trying to bring in the policies to trigger the revenue collection. Mr. Ayota has already said that we target so much the fewer percentage of the population that are already in the tax base. But from where I sit, and my belief is that we can do extraordinary things using very basic, ordinary measures. And for me, I think that's where we need to look now. I feel like what we are focusing on very much as a country is a lot of enforcement. The cost of enforcement is too high. If we use basic, ordinary measures, this can actually lead us to where we want to be. And what do I mean by this? First of all, let's go back and build confidence in the populace. Even me, I'm a tax person, but for me to appreciate that I need to pay tax, I must have confidence in where my tax is going to go and what it is going to do. So let's build confidence. Let's build on awareness of those taxpayers. Many people will say that they are non-compliant and they don't want to pay tax, but they are ignorant. They don't know. Even where we sit here, how many of us know the different taxes in Uganda? So if I'm doing a business and I know there's VAT and I'm paying VAT, I'll think that is tax. I pay tax. How many of us know there's stamp duty, there's pay as you earn, there's this, and which one comes first? How is it computed? Tax is very complex. So can we try and build more on giving awareness to the taxpayers and making them, first of all, appreciate what are the taxes, why do I need to pay them? Then once we've done that level of awareness to the taxpayers, let's organize them in groups. We cannot afford to go knocking on each of the shops in Kikubo or in the Juakalis saying we are going to train each and every one. As we sit here, many of these people or organizations have associations and groups. Most of the farmers have groups. Some of them have even gone to levels of circles. We have Juakali associations. We have visit small scale associations. We have, why can't we use that opportunity as a platform to give awareness to these informal sector players so that they appreciate taxes and pay tax? The effort we put in enforcement, when we have not even educated the people enough, is not fair. So I believe that we need to put in the efforts as government, as the stakeholders, what we know, the knowledge we have, to give it to everyone to appreciate and to do it in an organized and structured way. That way, taxes will grow exponentially and it will be self-accounting. Then the next thing I want to talk about is when we are setting up policies, I believe we should be able to set them in a way of long-term focus. Most of the policies come and they are a bit short term. The policy and the example that Professor Sejaka gave of the mobile money tax, when we look at it and project it, how sustainable is it? We saw the amounts that are expected or projected to come out of it. If we are being sincere, are those the amounts that are going to be got 5 years from now? Is that sustainable? I look at that measure as short term. What are the long-term measures? The other measure, which is very short term, is the 1% withholding tax on agricultural supplies. It's a bit misleading because it still goes back to government having more work to do. Withholding tax is advance income tax. So if you tell me that the farmers, the agricultural producers or suppliers are going to pay 1%, it means they are paying 1% income tax. Is government having another mechanism or way to collect the other 29%? We all know income tax is 30%. So if you tell someone in agriculture that you're going to withhold 1%, it means there's a 29% which has to be accounted for. The question is, does that person know? The news we saw where the sugarcane producers were up in arms, 1%. But a teacher earning 500,000 is paying taxes probably 20%, 10%, and some of us, anyone earning 410,000 is paying at 30%. Then anyone above 10 million, 40%. Then the person who is selling milk with a big, farm of so many things is crying over 1%. But again, we can't blame them. Have we really put them to that awareness? So for me, I think all in all, we need to have short-term measures, long-term measures, but we also need to work so much on awareness. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A lot of money still out there to pick by way of taxes. In economics, there is what we call nothing like dead weight loss. Maybe if this money is not picked from the farmers, especially those who sell milk, possibly they go and invest it in more management of the dry cattle corridor, which is now the reason we are threatening South Africa to be the top exporter of milk in Africa. So we haven't lost it all. It hasn't come to the minister, but neither has the minister lost it. We are now going to be a good exporter. I'm just saying, what does the other 29% do when it remains there? The economy still gets it, somewhere, somehow. But still, we can't let all of it remain there because it may not be adequately utilized. So how do we get solutions that give us both sides of the bread to move forward? How do we come up with a tax policy that gives us the revenue adequately enough, but also allows the economy to grow? Challenging things, tough discussions. I'm about to come and ask some people in the audience to speak to some things. Rachel Sevude here will not survive me to speak to agriculture because she has been reading a lot about agriculture and has even published something interesting about agriculture. But let me first wind up with Geoffrey. We want to finance the private sector. What is the pricing signal like for financing the private sector? Is there a problem? Do you have an answer?
Thank you. Minister, the price signal is not sectoral. The price signal is for the broad economy. What is important, I would like to emphasize on the common agreement we have reached here, that jobs is key. Most people do not realize that it is jobs which grow the economy, not the other way around. You cannot have growth in the air. I always, a long time ago when I used to teach, you can be a rock with no resources, but if you have a human capital policy, you create jobs, the economy can grow. We all know this. Yeah? You can be nothing and have nothing, but it's the human beings, it's us, it's the jobs which end up growing the economy. So this is something fundamental. Our monetary policy today is for jobless growth. It does not acknowledge jobs. The interest rate regime, the inflation tracking, if you look at the math, inflation is like 3.5%, 4% year on year on average, but the cost of money is in the upper double digits. That means there's no correlation between the inflation rate and the cost of money. That means you're not looking at jobs. That is why Mr. Yota was telling us that monetary policy, Mr. Minister, you have the mandate to introduce jobs as a component of monetary policy. We need to look at that. Moving forward, for NDP 3 and even for Vision 2040, jobs is the underlying gear or trigger which will enable us to even realize the middle income economy dispensation which we are looking for. So, Minister, this we propose should be another element of the engagement with your team. Where to place the jobs signal in the economy? Of course, the answer is obvious, should be everywhere. You yourself have said that if an investor comes, the first thing you're going to ask is how many jobs. So the same thing is when our friends in the BOU are positioning for inflation targeting, the question of jobs should also be asked. And they must have an answer, they must have a response. It's not as if it is hard work, because we must have the targets for both jobs and inflation. We must have those targets. So now, the engagement we are proposing should, one of the key ingredient for the engagement we are proposing is jobs. And the threshold, as I said before, for job creation is those 8 points of GDP growth, Mr. Minister. Again, we're looking forward to having that engagement because we know in the private sector that we can actually get those points provided we move from the short-term budget-related signals to medium and long-term. I would like to conclude by the long conversation, Minister, you have been having on infrastructure funding. We, in the capital markets industry, we believe that we can fund just about maybe 60, 70, even 80% of infrastructure. But what signal are you giving us? We cannot do that through short-term signals. By definition, infrastructure finance is medium to long-term. We need a 30-year signal from you, Minister. That is a sign of confidence where you are saying through that signal that for the next 30 years, I am telling you, as Honorable Kasaija, that you can expect the inflation regime, you can expect the interest rate regime to be within this narrow band, and you sign. And we will believe you, and we will pull out the money. So I would like to stop there, Mr. Minister, and we look forward to the engagement with your team.
Thank you. Thank you. I like the way things are being twisted around. We thought we were discussing growth with jobs, he seems to be saying jobs with growth. The reverse is also true. This is what we are saying, doesn't matter where you begin, you want to keep the cycle revolving. Economists again say the demand for labor is derived demand. What are we saying here? Nobody just walks into town to employ people. You first see an opportunity. In the process of trying to realize that opportunity, you realize you need a few people to help you here. So we need also to have a deliberate effort to create these opportunities. And it looks like monetary policy is going to play a different role in creating these opportunities. Fiscal policy has got to leave some space. Right now we have a lot of crowding out and also attracting. Ayota, where does he put his 80 billion when he has it? Mr. Minister and everybody here, even if I had my money and the Minister of Finance is saying a 2-year bond is 17%, don't expect me to go down to farming. There are risks of locusts, there are armyworms, there are all sorts of things. When I put my money in the ministry, I go down and play golf. So there is a signal that we need to be looking at. And also I think the other important message coming through, there are things we don't do to grow, we do them because we have grown. I want to believe some of the investments happening in China, they are not doing them to grow, but because they have grown. They just put up a bridge 55 kilometers. Ugandans have been amazed by half a kilometer of a bridge. 55 kilometers. You don't do such a bridge to grow, but you do it because you have grown. So what made China grow for them to begin doing these kinds of things? So certain projects we need to really think and say what projects will give us the growth next year and the other year. Then in 30 years, we are able to challenge the Chinese at least and do some 1 kilometer of a bridge. I'm going to open up to the floor shortly, but we're talking about aggregate demand driving growth. And aggregate demand, and Rachel will be speaking to that, the bulk of Ugandans earn their money out of farming. If they are not earning money out of farming because maize is 200, that is if the armyworms have not eaten it, then you have nobody who is going to buy Alan's manufacturer's product. So the economy is kind of integrated, and I'm glad, Minister, you talked about backward and forward linkages in the economy, an integrated kind of economy. I want to speak to that in our next discussions. Let me just pick one more person from the panel, and then I'll be down to the audience. Samuel, this thing called aggregate demand, is it aggregate? Is it single? What is it?
Thank you. I liked the way Geoffrey was talking about a signal. Then I remembered Malema in South Africa, the MP saying, Mama, we are waiting for a signal. Honorable Minister, we are also waiting for a signal from you. But on this point of aggregate demand, I just thought I should bring it out in a simple way. And I think Rachel, in their report, which they brought out this week, have touched on the issue of the 70% who are supposed to be subsistence farming. I don't know, maybe we should stop using the word subsistence farming, because there are much fewer people who are not in the money economy in one way or another. So, but this is a historical thing which we keep on saying. But there are some people use money to a larger extent. But the point here, when we say that the 70% are subsistence farming, I think we need to recoin this and say these people are poor and they don't have enough consumption power which we need in the economy, so that they are significantly impacting in terms of consuming our industrial production. So that is when we begin to say we are poor because we are poor. So the question we were discussing, Honorable Minister, which you need to take away and discuss with some of your technical people, is how do we stimulate aggregate demand amongst these 70%, so that when you talk about industrializing, you have these people consuming bread, consuming the soap, consuming the oil that is coming from your factory, the cooking oil that is coming from your factories. The things that you make on an everyday basis, how do you increase their consumption? There is a statistic on consumption of protein itself. One of the things they say about protein consumption. That is why some of the people in Africa are small, because they don't consume enough protein. Now, there is data, for instance, on chicken consumption, that the average Ugandan consumes about 2 kilos of chicken per annum. But in South Africa, the average person is consuming about 40 kilos of chicken per annum. So those small things about consumption, about daily purchases in the formal economy are what we need to talk about. How do we increase aggregate demand so that these people consume and spur more growth, which in then will increase your kitty in terms of the taxes that you collect. So we did not come up with a good answer on that, but that is a debate we must be talking about. And maybe the answer will come from agriculture. How do we move from the subsistence agriculture we're talking about and move into agribusiness, and then move into a more sustainable value chain, whereby these people then are participating actively in the economy. Thank you.
A space of inclusive growth. How do we bring the 68, 69, nearly 70% to be part of the economy? I'm not very sure about the chicken statistics. Maybe that includes the foxes. They seem to eat more chicken than us, especially in the rural areas. Let me request my panelists to switch off their microphones. Please bring me a microphone to Rachel to zoom in into that agriculture as part of the investment, what came out of the World Bank economic update. And then I'll switch over to Alan. You'll have some 2, 3, 4 minutes, industrialization with jobs. And then who will be number 3? I'll be waiting for some hands to come up to be part of this discussion. Rachel, I'm ambushing. Rachel is my mama because she shares that name with my mom. So whenever anybody carries that name, I just ambush them.
Thank you very much. This is not a modern name because you can refer to it as Lakeri, and then you'll know where some of us also got it from, because I got it from my granny. Yeah, thank you very much for the question on agriculture. You've really ambushed me because I wasn't ready to talk, but I will say something. Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we have is that much as agriculture is supposed to be a source of employment, or we claim that it's a source of employment because over 70% of the population is actually there, the people are not doing much in agriculture. The jobs that are there are very, maybe you can use the word productivity, because if you divide the amount of output that is coming from there with the number of people that are there, you realize that if productivity was to increase in that sector, would actually have much faster growth in the sector, and that would have contributed to much faster growth. And what are some of the challenges in that sector? Some of the things have already been talked about. For example, agricultural finance. We know that access to finance is critical for development of the entire food chain, coming from agriculture into the food system. But because of the challenges that we've had, the cost of finance, but also accessibility, because of the type of farmers that we have, the bulk of them are in the subsistence sector. They don't have the right collateral or the right facilitation to be able to access this the funding. You find that cannot actually contribute to their growth. When you move beyond finance, there are also issues related to infrastructure. There is a lot that is being done about infrastructure, say into the road sector, but there is a lot missing when you come to things like irrigation and water harvesting technologies are not being used to actually sustain, to produce a sustainable increase in agricultural productivity. The rural roads are also quite missing. And so you find that there is no connection between production and markets. But also ICT can do a lot, and it has done a lot elsewhere in terms of improving productivity of some of these things. So there is quite a lot that can be done. But maybe just one additional thing that I can talk about that is leading to low productivity, and that is land. And most of the time we don't talk about this issue, but I think we think that transformation of agriculture will not come unless we take the issue of land and its transformability in terms of being used for production, if this issue is not addressed head on. Because, for example, if you look at the north, where we happen to launch the report, you find that is the biggest source of arable land that can be used for agriculture for Uganda. But because of the tenure system, because of the lack of systems that can be used, even people who would have used that land to, say, access credit, they can't because it's not registered. Because it's collectively held, it is also very hard to transform it from one person to another investor. You've heard of the stories of people who go naked because of someone, because of the efforts to try and to do investments in those areas. So there are quite a number of things that you can think about in order to make the agricultural sector contribute to better growth. Maybe I can stop there, but we could also later on discuss about the institutional issues that are also hindering development of agriculture. Thank you.
Interesting. That's a snapshot of the recently launched economic update by the World Bank. The reason I ambushed her, I knew the facts are still fresh from her mind. And Honorable Minister, rightfully we have noticed that part of the recovery and growth was coming from agriculture. Even in this difficult period when the prices were low, agriculture still made its contribution. So we want to look into the agricultural sector and say, what is it that we got right? Or what is it that agriculture on its own got right? And how do we sustain that growth, that the 3.9 that we were able to realize out of agriculture? Was it just good rains, or was it something more? In research, we have discovered quite a number of things that have been happening, nice things in this country, some of them being done by National Agricultural Research Organization, NARO. We all know what they did to banana bacteria wilt. It had literally wiped out our bananas. They haven't found the solution, but they found the way of keeping the bacteria at bay. And current predictions and estimates are like they have saved over 330 billion per year in banana alone by introducing technologies of preventing the bananas being eaten up and wiped out by bacteria wilt. They have done other investments in other areas. They have come up with varieties that are higher yielding. So some of the higher yields we are seeing is not because just the rains have changed. The good rains and bad rains have been with us. But now we have more higher yielding varieties, drought tolerant varieties, faster maturing varieties that NARO has been working on. So when we get into agriculture, we need to be very strategic. Where do we put our money? I was reading a book by Mamdan and his friends, and I found an interesting phrase that farming is what farmers do. Agriculture is broader. Some people sell, some people trade, some people do business in the agricultural sector, but they are not necessarily farmers. So even as we allocate the 800 billion to agriculture, even as people say raise it to 10%, we've got to be very strategic. Where are we putting the money? Not everything we call seed is seed. So how do we make sure the transition rates from what NARO is doing to the farmer is right? Because a lot of people are buying and packaging things that are not seed. We are soon going to plant stones in the name of seed. So we need some strong regulation there, some strong investment of the connection to make sure NARO and others are empowered to multiply these good seed varieties and make sure they get to the farmers. That's a discussion, I think, and Rachel has said, an institutional kind of way of discussing, not just the money, not just the planning, but now to zoom in to institutions and get the result out. The results from NARO are available, and more are going to be coming in. Of the work we have been working together with them to really quantify what has been their contribution towards these issues. They have come up with a variety of industrialization of sorghum and cassava that is purely for making brew, local brew. Unfortunately, we put a tax and we have killed that industry. We need to come and have a discussion on that. Alan, where is Alan? Somebody give a microphone to Alan. You have some 3 minutes to pick for. This is industrialization with jobs. What is happening? You're not giving us the jobs. We have given you tax incentives. We have given you energy. We have given you roads. What more do you want? Our blood? Alan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhumza. My name is Alan Senyondwa. I am an economist working with Uganda Manufacturers Association. Now, allow me to start with the statistics, since it's a day of statistics. For those of you who are not aware, Uganda is the 23rd poorest country on earth. You should be aware of that by World Bank. If you want to use CIA statistics, they will tell you you're the 18th poorest. If you run away to IMF, they will tell you maybe you're the 24th poorest. Whichever case, you are poor. The question is, what can we do to get out of this poverty? I see here key policy triggers for economic growth. And it's not about the economic growth. It's about the last word there, jobs. The theme we have of our budget is industrialization for job creation and shared prosperity. Till now, I haven't heard how we're doing the jobs issue. Now, 70% of our population is below the age of 40, and I ask myself one question. What are we going to do with the 25 million young people who are coming into the job market in the next 7 years? We are saying we're talking jobs. The next statistic I'll give. 70%, as we are aware, of Uganda's population is in agriculture. The whole of this 70%, which happens to be now at about 10 to 14 million people, contribute 24% of the GDP of this nation. Now, just listen to this next statistic. 1.5 million people, which is about 10% of the population in this country, contribute through industry, that is the industrial sector, contributes another 24% of this economy. Okay, the 70% contributes 24, the 10% also contributes 24. Now the last statistic which everyone knows, the rest of the 20% which is in services contributes the 52%. Now, the problem with that statistic goes ahead to say that the 70% which contributes to the 24% of the GDP only contribute 1% of the finance minister's taxes. So 70% of the population, 1% of the taxes. The question then lies in, where should we create the jobs? Should it be in agriculture? Then if you say it is agriculture, then the question lies in, how do you increase the demand in the agriculture place so that people can invest more in agriculture? And the CFO of NSF has said, oh, let's divide the NADs to 1, 2, and 3, so that we can have enough market for the products made in agriculture to be bought. Now, the pretense here is that it's a new thing. We have never done it before. We have done this thing before. It's called cooperatives. Pure and simple. We can go around it 101 times. It will always go back to one word: cooperatives. They will buy the produce from the farmers at the appropriate price so that the farmers can then invest in agriculture. Which then brings me to the second level. If we get the farmers to produce the crop and sell it at the appropriate price, then we in the manufacturing sector will have the raw materials to produce the goods, which then the farmers will buy. Now, that brings me to another level. I'll just give 2 examples and then switch. So, I've dealt with the issue of raw materials. The other problems have been interest rates or credit costs. Let me just slip over to markets and then I come back, just to show you what systems can do to an economy. We have over 20,000 primary schools in our nation. All right? And these 20,000 schools have 8 million young people. Now, these 8 million young people need about 2 pairs of uniforms. If you go right now to these primary schools, they all put on polyester, some product made somewhere else. And yet we claim to be producing some of the best cotton on earth. That's why I say industrialization is something called a national conspiracy. You either want it or you don't. If you want it, do it. These 8 million young people can put on uniforms made with cotton from farmers in Uganda. It is not new again, Mr. Dr. Muhumuza. It is what we used to put on when we were young. So there is nothing new about these things. And we should stop pretending that we're coming up with new ways of developing the economy. These things are known. All we are requesting is one. Can we start doing them?
Thank you.
And now, lastly, the positive part. We can show that where government has come together with the private sector, for example in Bubu, and taken off some of the products bought, for example, in medical services, in army uniforms, the industrial capacity utilization of these factories in the textile industries has moved from 57 to 65. So it is possible. Where the government and our dams have taken on iron and steel made in Uganda, the steel sector will tell you our production has gone up from 55 to 58% capacity utilization. So we can do these things. We just only have to build a system all the way from raw materials to production to the markets. And can we start by concentrating on Ugandan market? Thank you very much.
Interesting that even the minerals we know are still in the ground. We haven't dug them up. There is a lot of potential, a few things to tie up here and there. I'm waiting for hands out there. Maybe you are so far out for me to see. The microphone on that side. I see the lady first. You'll tell us your name. And then Top Finance Bank. And then I'll move over to the other table.
Thank you. My name is Arimi Babratedi. I work with NSSF as a head of marketing and communication. My question goes to the Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, I'd like to thank you for your keynote address. I think it's very heartwarming to see that our growth rate for the last financial year exceeded the budget projections. I also noticed that you talked about edible oil, but I had hoped you were going to talk about the petroleum reserves, and so that's where my question is. Honorable Minister, you noticed that oil exploration in Uganda actually kicked off about 100 years ago, 98 years to be precise, 1920. And we expect to see our first oil barrels in 2020. Now, I'd hoped you'd talk about oil because it's another big opportunity for our country. And my question specifically is, how will we ensure that we actually leverage the opportunities presented by these resources to ensure that we propel our economy to middle income status? according to our national development plan. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Teddy. There is Top Finance Bank on the same table. They might finance as their Top Finance Bank. Are you?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Chris Kabagambe. Chris Kabagambe, I'm the Managing Director at Top Finance Bank. We are happy to, for the second year running, to be sponsoring this forum. I'd like to mostly build on what most of the panelists have talked about, especially around the areas of agribusiness. One is that Patrick talked about the perverse stocks. Certainly it is important and highly recommended, but with care, Mr. Minister of Finance, because people will cut deals. If you do those deals, those kind of stocks, people will cut deals and the whole thing will lose intention if it's not done well. But if it's done well, highly recommended. Additionally, I like to add on post-harvesting handling, on top of controlling the market and the flow of prices around the agricultural produce. We need to help the subsistence farmers to control quality. Yes, Patrick talked about mobilizing big tonnage and selling it to Malawi country to country, but the quality must be able to support that sale. I joined banking from an agricultural graduation. I graduated at my career from agribusiness school, and we produce a lot of maize through agriculture financing and through a program called PL for 8 at that time, for those of us who remember it. And the quality, even World Food Program alone in Uganda could not buy our maize because of quality. So post-harvest handling technology and support. The other area is land. Yes, we produce. Yes, Rach has also talked about the land systems, but how do we put policies around land use? She talked about fragmentation and the tenure system, that's registration and administration. But is this a time to actually discuss as a nation, how is our land use controlled? Yes, land belongs to the people, but should that be the case? Maybe land should belong to government in this country. It is controversial, but maybe we need to seriously, Mr. Minister, think about it and control how to use them. We agree this side is for agriculture, this side is for industry, this side is for this side is for another use. And then we can start talking about agribusiness. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There are emerging discussions and realities in northern Uganda, where the people are beginning to partner with those with money to do farming on their land, as long as the assurances, and maybe these are some of the realities that have made agriculture bounce back. Because now you don't have to get your 100 million to buy land. You go and negotiate with the people there, get assurances for each other, and begin with your 100 million with planting. It's kind of leasing, and we possibly want to investigate some of those ideas. I have a hand there, one of them, and then I'll move back to this table. Please be short and precise, maybe just a minute or two, so that we can do as many people. We have a few minutes to midnight by my clock. I live in India with some Indian friends of mine. One of the corrections I wanted to make, I'm now on the board of Baroda, not Bank of India. So I live with the Indians, and we are getting to midnight soon.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Joseph Awino. I'm the head of sales at Fresh Dairy. I would want to start with some positives, basically to support the Honorable Minister's comments. And my comments are going to be on the dairy sector, because we noted that it has been the main contributor into the agricultural sector growth. The positive statistics is that milk production in Uganda has grown by 20% from 2015-2016 to 2017-2018. The production currently stands at 2.5 billion liters annually, from 2.08 billion liters in 2015-2016. So that is good growth. The other side of this statistic is that out of this total milk produced, for those people who are good in maths, you can calculate and say that 80% is marketed. That talks about industrialization, production. 20% is consumed on farm. Now, get me right, 80% is marketed. Out of this 80%, only 33% is processed. 67% is sold locally, in the bufundas and everywhere. That is bad statistics. Despite all this, there has been growth in terms of milk production, the 33%, the exports, and as the Honorable Minister said, the exports have gained. This year, if I can blow our own trumpet as a company, we won the Presidential Award on exports for milk products. That's Fresh Dairy, a company which a few years down the line people had written off. Now, coming out slowly, how do we as Fresh Dairy view our input in production, enhanced production, to trigger economic growth with jobs? Me, I'll put it sustainable jobs. Yeah, because you can get a job today, tomorrow it's gone. What we are doing, and I'll talk very quickly across the value chain, with the farmers. We are working very, very closely with the farmers, the Honorable Minister. The moderator talked about cooperatives, and the last speaker talked about cooperatives. We are trying to shorten the supply chain. It's so long in the milk industry. You find a lot of brokers on the way. They will say they are mopping up milk, but they are denying that farmer the opportunity to earn the extra money they would have made without a long supply chain. Given that, as Brookside, as Brookside, because Brookside and Fresh Dairy is one, we are paying farmers about 3 billion every 2 weeks in this country. And it is our joy to see that this money goes spread across Uganda, in the north, in the southwest, in the west. Unfortunately, this money only goes to central, west, and southwest, because the government needs to help develop dairy production in the east. I know there was a cooperative society in Mbale, it went down. So all this needs to be revived. Now, with the farmers, we help them form cooperatives. Some of the financial institutions here will agree with us that we organize Farmers Field Day to increase on quality, as one of the contributors has mentioned. We are looking at a way, Bwana Minister, how do we pay farmers based on quality so that we can encourage production which has value. It will help develop the market. We are also facilitating them with inputs and exposure. In this country right now, those people who come from the cattle corridor, you will realize that there are people with demonstration farms helping to develop milk output in Uganda. Moving very fast into manufacturing, just so that I save on time. In the last 3 years, Fresh Dairy, there's been an injection of capital investment of $20 million US. This has gone in through improving the value chain from the farmers to the distribution to the consumer. Currently, most of you probably are seeing the young little girl who are saying, I want Muganda Wange. Some of you have seen that. All this is investment which we put down in the last 3 years. But there's a challenge when it comes to creating jobs. If only the authorities which are tasked to ensure that there's potential in developing human capital would support the running of Dairy Training Institute in Ntv. You find that we are faced with a challenge when we want boiler technicians. You have to import them from out. Because as somebody put it, the tertiary level institutions were killed. You want a boiler technician, you have to import them. The few we have, we are trying to build capacity, taking them to Tetra Pak South Africa, Tetra Pak Kenya. But the problem is when they come back, they are being poached. So you train somebody, but somebody else creates confusion around them. Yeah. So I think it is critical that those in authority should help establish the Dairy Training Institute. To me, we could borrow from the hotel industry. You look at our neighbors Kenya, where there's Utalii College.
Yes.
Every place where you go and consume a cup of coffee, there's at least 0.2% tax going towards the management of the training institution. If that could be done by the dairy processors, so that Ntebe's Dairy Training Institute can develop capacity, the better.
Thank you.
Then coming straight to the issue of tax.
Yes, that's the last one.
Yeah, the issue of tax. The experts probably would agree with me that in Uganda, it's the only country in East Africa where milk is levied 18% VAT. How do you balance this between tax for growth and tax to encourage domestic consumption? Milk is a basic requirement. That's one thing I would put in as a challenge. How do you encourage domestic consumption? No wonder 67% is sold informally, because you are stifling consumption by putting 18% on every purchase of a pint of milk. Thank you very much.
Point made. Very good.
Yeah.
We have one more hand there. Please take little time. Yes. I think that's the reason I only buy milk for my dogs at home, because I can only do that once a month. I'm not encouraging any human being to get interested in milk, because dogs don't talk to me, so I can do it once a month and they won't complain. I can't afford it.
Thank you.
You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm Laban Rutare, representing Community Care Consultants, and I'm also a environment consultant, but also a progressive farmer. And as we look at this broad subject of economic growth, with a special focus on job creation, we salute the NTV and the other partners for this kind of a session. This is the kind that really educates, that mobilizes, that reorganizes us. And I think going at this level and even lower, this is the kind of mobilization and training that one of us was talking about. There is also, of course, we have to appreciate that the government has put in effort, and we have had growth we have had an increasing economic growth, but there is a counter consumption trends at the national and at the level of the whole society, where basically we have deficits at all these levels. It is surprising to find that getting a set like this one requires selling one of the biggest cows at my corral, including balancing the export and import trends. There is, friends, there is a challenge of neglecting the human element. We have the human capital. While we talk of all these, the center is the human at all levels, the producers, for this case where we have the majority in the agricultural sector, and yet we have invested a lot, which is necessary anyway, in the infrastructure, roads, the electricity and the rest, fine, proper. But we must at the same time, in the short run, include a special affirmative action of bringing up these producers, of empowering them, and they need information, the right technology, the right attitude, and the right kind of organization. We are talking of cooperatives, right, if we have a hybrid, than those past that collapsed. So that we are not only informed by failures, the tradition, but we also are innovative enough basing on study and information, so that whatever we do is not only for doing, but expect realities in terms of achievement. And then we, of course, they have talked about education proper, formal and informal. This time, in fact, the formal is not very strategic. People are learned but not educated. Instead of job creators, they are the job seekers. Very funny. And this is where we talk of the change of attitude. What kind can we do? And then there is lastly the issue of policy. to do with the different ministries. I think we need synergy, we need unity, and there is in this respect need for affirmative action, especially on the agricultural sector, where issues like barricking, issues like incentives for among the profiles of farmers, these who already are job creators, can we support them so that on contracts they also support us in employing the others? Things, lastly, one area of that is also barricking and creating a capacity for value addition because people produce. With pre-financing, with assurance, with contract, people produce. But when the produce and process come down, then it frustrates the whole process to whom it belongs. We all say, oh, sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think key messages are coming from that discussion, issues to do with shortening the length of the value chain. A lot of people, as I said, are not farmers. They're in agriculture, and they are literally standing between the good price the farmers would get and the farmers. So we need to find a way of getting some of those non-agricultural people in that system. I'll be coming to this table. Where is Kalinaki? Kalinaki, you can't escape this without saying a word or two. Just a word or two. But let the microphone come to...
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. And I also thank the NTV and all the sponsors on board. My name is Godfrey Busiku. I work with the East African Manufacturers Association as the CEO. And I'll be precise and concise on, because today's theme is on the key policy triggers for the economic growth with jobs. When the Honorable Minister was starting his keynote speech, I noted him asking on where his fellow honorable members of parliament were. And I would wish that they were also here, but I know they are watching us. And to us as members in the, who are discussing here on the floor, I think our point is giving us submissions or suggestions to what should happen to create the jobs. And me, I know most of us have been raising tertiary solutions or remedies to these challenges. But I want to offer a primary or a nursery solution to creating these jobs. And that is to honorable members of parliament stroke the government of Uganda to please resign the whole educational curriculum. Simple. It's simply outdated. It's colonial. We no longer need our children in primary 7 to learn about John Speke discovering the River Nile. We no longer need that. Most of the things are outdated. We in the private sector need skilled people, because right now if I'm to hire a graduate, I must put him on probation for some 2-3 years to get the experience that I need. Which is not unfortunate, which I would say is unfortunate. And then to the discussants, one person raised something which is key that I would reiterate with a question, and that is the fiscal indiscipline that is the root cause for high interest rates in the banking system. I dream of a day that I can walk to Stanbic, to Top Finance Bank, to any bank, and if I'm borrowing a loan, the interest is below 15% or 10%. And I know it's possible. The question is, how do we curtail or bring down these fiscal indisciplines? Because because you said that, yes, there is discipline, there is, I don't know, people running to TB or treasury bills, they're lending. I didn't understand, I'm not an economist, but I want us to find a solution. How do we address? Does it need political will? Does the Honorable Minister need to help us? Exactly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right there, you take that mic, and I think I'll be drawing down towards the close, unless I get a bailout from the American government. Those are the ones who still have time on this day. You have 2 minutes, sir.
I'll use 1.5. Thank you so much. My name is Kawesa Richard. I'm the Director for Strategy for the Anti-Counterfeit Network, SCN, that is in collaboration with NTV. And of course, Mwami Badagawa, PSFU as well. I saw some statistics, and I love statistics. I liked what Uma said. I saw someone saying that companies are operating at 53% of capacity. And then I also read from UNBS that 54% of all the products you can find in Uganda are fake. They were very conservative because it must be about 83. Fake, counterfeit. Now, if you are a company, if you are a businessman that has come in to invest money in Uganda and you open up a factory, and the counterfeiter is in Chikubo or somewhere in Kaderwe, manufacturing the same thing you are manufacturing that is not even safe for our own health, how are you going to move from 53%? You're actually going to move from 53% going down because the counterfeiter is eating into your genuine market. So if we do not protect the legitimate businesses of those we call investors bringing in their money from the menace of counterfeits, there is no way we are going to create jobs in those companies to stimulate economic growth.
Thank you.
And number 2, which is the last one, Heifer International had a report on 3 things that have affected young people not to participate in agriculture. One of them was the cost of land. The second one was accessibility to capital. And you know what the third one? Lack of accessibility to genuine seeds. The farmer is going to plant seeds that will never grow because they've bought them from 54% on the market. They are fake. Fertilizers and pesticides, the earthworm things are not dying. Why? Because the pesticides are fake, genuine. So in our strategy, we need to factor in intellectual property and how we deal with counterfeits to be able to secure jobs for economic growth. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Kalinaki, where is he? And then Honorable Karuhanga will wind up the floor for now.
Thank you, Fred. I knew you would ambush me, but I'll get you. I just have 2 very basic recommendations to the Minister. First, it's a good thing that the government is now taking jobs very seriously. It would be useful, since we see Parliament debating some of the important things, it would be interesting to see what Cabinet says about jobs. So maybe the next session you have on jobs, Honorable Minister, have it televised so that we get a sense of the arguments that are being made and the proposals that are being made in Cabinet. And we at NTV will be more than happy to have it, televised live. And then related to that, if jobs are a key metric that the government is working towards, I think it would be useful to get a monthly report of how many jobs have actually been created and some kind of targets so that we can actually see whether you are doing the things that you've promised to do. Thank you.
Honapito, did I talk about your space? Please give the microphone to Honapito. I talked about his space. I want him to speak into the numbers of what is happening out there. He's been supporting a number of farmers in cassava and sorghum growing areas. And then I'll come to Honorable Karuhanga and begin to close off the session.
Thank you. Already introduced, I represent a sector that brings happiness at this hour of the day. So I think I'm sure they are preparing to serve. I wanted to just answer from our perspective as alcohol, what Dr. Sajaka said. How do we create aggregate demand? And I think alcohol is the best area to illustrate this point. 67% of all the alcohol consumed in Uganda is not related to jobs. It's the homemade. It's not taxed. It does not employ. It only employs home labor. Our mothers, our aunties, what we know. So the celebrated job creators in alcohol are only 23%. And we would love to get all the others to come to where there is taxation.
Ntv, turning on your world.
Central Bank security breach. Aides to former senior Bank of Uganda official Justin Bajenda face parliamentary probe committee give details of how documents were smuggled from the central bank. Good evening and a warm welcome to NTV Tonight. My name is Josephine Karunji. Let's begin this newscast with the headlines. Arose by any other name, Parliament passes the controversial bill to regulate the safe development and application of biotechnology and GMOs. We tell you why the bill has a new name. Also